The meaning of breach is like two meanings, double meaning. On one hand, it means when you see pictures, photographs of a whale that is jumping out of the water, that is called a breach. That's something that they do. I'm not sure why whales breach out of the water, but it's just a behavior that they have. But it's also a term that means to break something, like to break a contract or trust, some kind of like, not a betrayal, but almost like a breaking of an agreement. So just the idea of this double meaning of breach is on one hand, this purely behavioral kind of animal event. And then on the other hand, it's kind of like thinking about our relationship with animals, you know, and with nature, and kind of like how I feel like in a way we have broken some kind of an agreement with, you know, with nature in some sense. In the piece, there are a lot of field recordings, because I do a lot of field recording based work. It's like kind of how I started in doing experimental music. So in this case, I went to Mexico, to Baja, Mexico, in this one area where a lot of gray whales go to breed. And so it was a trip that I took where, you know, the whales, it was a very protected space, so you could really like get close to the whales. And the beginning part of the piece has a section where there was one very, very still day, very quiet, and I was recording from the beach, from the lagoon. And it was so quiet. There was no wind at all. And all you could hear in the distance, like all of these whales like coming up for air. So you could hear them like, almost like the whole landscape was breathing. It was really beautiful. And so the beginning of this piece is just really just those sounds. And then there's a boat in the background. You can hear like a little bit note, and that's the boat. And then the boat kind of in the piece gets louder and louder and louder until it kind of overtakes everything. And then the piece really changes to almost like this totally synthetic experience of sound. There's a whole like sort of series of stages that I go through with a piece like this. And in this case, it started with the field recording and just noticing almost like the way that these sounds were naturally spaced in, were sort of placed in time, like how the sound events had this natural kind of rhythm to them. My main interest and concern was to start with that rhythm, the pacing of it, the actual pacing of the sounds, and then to take that pacing with electronic sounds and then just like raise up the tension to where it's just like all of a sudden you're in this completely different place. So it's most of the information that I get as a composer for this piece just comes from actually the field recordings themselves. Because I knew that this was going to be at INAgrm, I used a lot of the tools that they have, like the GRM tools, which are amazing. So I used those a lot, and I also used analog synthesizers to kind of almost like mimic these natural sounds. So there are sounds of birds in the field recordings, and then later in the piece, there are these synthesized sounds from these analog synthesizers that are just that almost kind of sound like birds. And then all of those sounds were sort of fed through the GRM software, and then I used that to spatialize the sounds.